Welcome to the Zachrilege cast, the show where the conversation flows as easily as a measles-infected lollipop. Thank you again to last week's interviewee, Wesley of the Atheist Nomad Show. Tonight we're bringing in Deb, otherwise known as Heretic Woman. We'll talk about how it makes me tired just hearing about all the shows she's on. We can discuss her interactions with Muslim men on Facebook, how she pays Paul to be his voiceover queen on Quranify Me, and how her Beyond the Trailer Park is the Foo Fighters of atheist side projects. How are you doing, Deb?
I'm awesome, thank you. I'm not quite frozen yet today, so it's good.
Yeah, we probably have a slight difference in latitude here. I'm in Atlanta, and we get upset when it gets below 50.
Oh, Atlanta, yes. We're looking at -9 Celsius right now. I'm not sure what that is in Merkin, but
Yeah,
it's
the
damn
American to
cold.
Canadian translator. I wish I had one of those.
I know we need one. Well, we're gonna need one for North Carolina, definitely.
Oh
Recent.
yeah, it's
As far as
gonna.
I know, I'm the only Canadian going, as far as I know. So if there's any other Canadians going to ReasonCon, like, give me a shout, because as far as I know, I'm the only one.
Yeah, there should be like an award for this traveled for sure. And
hmm
we'll start the show talking about your own journey. So, what kind of religious background and family do you have?
Well, I started out in something called the United Church of Canada, and I don't think there's anything quite like it in the United States. It was an amalgamation of four other Protestant sects that got together. I think it was in the 1920s, or no, it would have been later because my grandmother remembered. So it was like a small group of, like, I think there were Methodists and Protestants and a couple, or Protestant Pentecostals, but not like the wacky Pentecostals. But they all got together and formed the United Church, thus the name. And it is actually, I would guess, the most liberal church in all of Canada. They had female clergy as long as I remember. They always had women ministers. But they were one of the first, if not the first church in Canada to allow gay clergy as well. And as far as I know, they do perform gay weddings. So they're pretty liberal. And my mother always made us go to Sunday school, which sucked. I hated Sunday school. I like it was the most boring thing ever, and I didn't like being school that much as it was, which is ironic because my mother was a school teacher. But my father was never religious, and I suspect that he was probably, at the very least, agnostic, if not an actual atheist. But it was just, you didn't talk about that stuff. But we're pretty liberal. Like, as I say, we were kids. We got dragged to church a lot, and I think that was a lot of my mother thinking that that's just what you do when you're a parent, and that's, you don't teach your kids morals, you drag them off to church and let Sky Daddy teach them morals, which I find kind of ironic now, but so that was up until high school. No, sorry, grade 8. And when I was in grade 8, I had a very good friend who belonged to an offshoot of the Dutch Reformed Church, which is very Calvinistic. And for those of you who don't know Calvinists, they're heavy into predestination, and they're pretty strict, like women, are barefoot and pregnant and all that fun stuff. So she convinced me to go to what they called Kids Club. It was like Sunday school, but in the middle of the week. I think it was like on Wednesday or Thursday or some shit. But she convinced me to go to that. And at the time, we were a single parent family. It was just me and my brother and my mother. And we didn't do stuff like, kids who would go camping or would go on vacations and things like that. We didn't do that because we didn't have the money. And this church was right across the street from our house. So she drags me over there, and I start going because she said if I go every week, I would be allowed to go camping with them in the summertime, which to me is like, oh, yay, I get to go on a vacation somewhere. So I'm like, okay. I was already semi-religious. Like I really was trying to like feel the God, and I did in the United Church. They have something called confirmation, which when you're I think I went through that when I was about 12 or 13, and that's like when you officially declare your membership to the church, and they have a little ceremony and shit, and I was like, ooh, I feel the Holy Spirit and all of that lovely stuff. But the Calvinists were a little more than. I mean, I dove right in with both feet, and I was running around, telling my 8-year-old brother that he better repent or he's going to go to hell, and he was like, "You're weird." But I got into that for a number of years when I was a teenager. So, and my family weren't that religious on that side. My mother's parents were quite religious. But my father's side, no one ever set foot in a church unless somebody was dead or getting married.
That's one way to go about it. That's how like a lot of people are.
Yep. Yeah. And in fact, I remember when my brother was born, it was the thing, you christen your kid, and so my mother's family had a christening gown that I apparently wore, and my father's reaction was, yeah, we'll do the christening thing, but no son of mine is wearing a goddamn dress. we're rednecks, what can I say? Farm folk, so yeah. So it happened, but there was no christening gown involved, that was for sure. So yeah, and it's funny because for all of dragging us to church all the time when we were kids, my mother doesn't even go to church anymore at all. So, but I got in with these Calvinists for quite a while, and there were times, like I remember when we did go camping, it was property owned by one of the church elders, and we had to have Bible study every day and that kind of crap. And I remember one of the Bible studies where they said it was one of those verses that said, the woman has to obey her husband. And I was just kind of like, what? I don't know if I like that. And my friend, that she'd been raised in this, and she's like, no, that's what Jesus wants, and that's how the Lord wants it, and that's how it is. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure that I'm good with that. But I just kind of sucked it up and went along. And they, like in those families, all of the wives, any of them that actually did work outside the home, every last one of them worked in a nursing home. So that was sort of the acceptable job. And I mean, my friend, her ambition in life at the time, and this was like in high school by then, her ambition in life was to go to Bible college, meet God's chosen man for her, and have a bunch of children. And that's what she wanted out of life. And as far as I know, that's about what she did.
Too bad that God hadn't invented Christian mingle yet, huh?
I know. She wouldn't. Well, I think she wanted to go to Bible college just to get out of the house because her family were pretty strict. But Bible college. Ugh. I don't know how anybody could. Like, what do you learn there? Like, do you actually learn anything that's useful at a Bible college? I don't know. I can't see that you would. Or, maybe how to be a nice housewife. Maybe they have classes on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you need a degree for that sort of thing. So
maybe if you're a Calvinist, you do.
Did you officially have a moment where you're like, all right, this is it, I'm done, or is it kind of a more gradual situation for you?
No, I'm actually one of those kind of light bulb moment people. So when I was 16, I met my high school boyfriend, and he is a scientist. He went on to become a physics engineer and is one of the smartest people I've ever known. And so when we were together, he was like a pretty liberal Lutheran, but he was intrigued by this major faith that I have. And he liked to debate, and I liked to debate because when I was in high school, I was we didn't have a debate team because we were Hicks and our school was like really small, but in our history class we used to do debates, and I was always like right in there on those debates, and I loved it. So he and I used to debate religion. And I, like most good Christians, I had not read the entire Bible. I'd only read the parts that I was told to read. And I was starting to find that when we got into theological debates, and not to be snooty, but I think I'm a pretty good debater, and I think I was back then too, I would always lose. I could never win against him, like ever, because he always had this logical explanation for stuff. And I've also always been a history nerd. And so back then, like, I was taking history in school, and I remember learning about Aboriginal legends and things like, one that sticks out of my mind, there was a story about how the chipmunk got its stripes on its back, and it was something like he insulted a bear and the bear chased him, and he was fast, but the bear managed to scratch him down his back, and that's why he's got stripes down his back that look like bear claws. That kind of stuff. And I got to thinking, you know, every religion out there, like the Greek and the Roman mythology that I learned in grade school, like nobody believes that anymore because we now know where lightning comes from. We know it's not Zeus throwing lightning bolts. And there's this, thinking about other religious ideas that, well, we know now that we have germs and that's why people get sick, and we don't need Jesus to come and cast out the demons and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, that was when the light bulb kind of went off, and I went, well, that's what all religion is. None of it's real. It's all just made up bullshit that people use because they're afraid of death and they don't know stuff. And that was just it. I went from like, you're all going to hell to, yeah, I don't care. I'm an atheist.
It's a dramatic transformation, but I don't know. I think it's natural.
It was, and it came at a time, actually, and I often feel a lot of empathy for people who have to go through the years and years of trying this version and that version, and, well, what about Eastern faith, and trying to find that something. Now, I did dabble in Wicca for a while in my early 20s, but I never... It wasn't from a standpoint of I actually believed that there were, earth gods or something. It was more from a meditation kind of view. So, but I did dabble in that for a while, and then I was like, no, this is too cutesy for me. I can't do that either. And rituals, I was like, why do I do rituals? I don't believe in the woo part. So... But I often too kind of feel for people that have to go through the whole transition with family. Like even people whose family may not be like super churchgoers, there's tends to be that, what do you mean you don't believe in God reaction. And I kind of escaped all of that because when it happened for me, it was within 2 to 3 weeks of leaving for university. So it was like, here's my life up to this point where I was with my boyfriend for 2 years, and I was super religious and I went to church all the time, and all of this, to, oh, I'm an atheist. I'm leaving like Hicksville for the city. We broke up before we left, as things like that happen. And all of that. So it was like I just cut off my old life and moved to school, and it's university. Nobody gives a shit if you're an atheist in university. Like, it's just, oh, okay, well, I'm a Catholic, but whatever. And that's more of a Canadian thing too, I think. We don't get so invested in what other people do as much, but it just became this like really clean break. So one minute I was, hick girl from the farm, Bible thumper, and the next thing I'm like, within a year I became goth chick in the university who's an atheist.
Pretty impressive. We need to see some pictures there.
There are, if anybody out there is on my vanilla Facebook, you'll know where to find those. If you're not, let me know, I can share.
Ooh, vanilla Facebook. Which Facebook do I have?
You've got the heathen Facebook.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
uh, I did that this summer actually because my family, I don't give a shit. If they want to make an issue about it, then screw you. I'm not that invested in them. But my husband's family, unfortunately, his mother and his sister are like really religious. Oh, and his cousin too. I have a cousin of his on there that are really religious. And I went back to college last year and I became acquainted with a number of actual practicing Muslims, and they're lovely people, but I don't like their religion, and you've seen the stuff I post. So I I had always up until now kind of tempered what I said on that Facebook, and I just decided this summer that I didn't want to do that anymore. So I created my current Facebook, which originally I had under a pseudonym, and stupid Facebook made me change it. But I was very lucky in that I never changed my name on my birth certificate when I got married. So I was able to prove to Facebook that Deborah McTaggart is a real person, because it is, and I can revert to that name legally anytime I bloody well want. So I have two legal names, so screw you, Facebook.
In your face, Facebook. See, I have two Twitter accounts just because it's
Mhm.
easier, but I just never post much to Facebook, so I just don't really care. I don't exactly post the
Yeah.
show to that, but I created a separate page, so it's kind of like, I don't know. It's more like it'll probably annoy people, and I don't know. I think 90% of people don't really give a crap about it, all that stuff.
Well, it's funny because Twitter is what started me doing everything that I'm doing now. This summer, well, after I went back to college, I had some health issues, and I was kind of stuck at home for most of last summer. And so I'd always resisted Twitter. I always kind of thought it was a bit of a lame idea because I'm like, you can post your update on Facebook all day long. Why do you need Twitter or whatever? And I never bothered. And no one I was friends with in real life was really caring about Twitter either. So this summer, it's an interesting progression because I had listened to a couple of atheist podcasts for a year or so, but I have a BlackBerry, so the podcatchers on there aren't as good as you know, iPhone or Android or whatever. And yes, I get made fun of for my BlackBerry all the time, but screw you people, I like it. Other than the podcatcher. So I'd only listened to a couple of shows, and I didn't really in fact, it wasn't until 2 phones ago that I even knew podcasts existed. It was like this app on my phone. What's a podcast? Oh, cool. So I started listening to those, and one of the shows that I listened to profiled David Michael in my Book of Mormon podcast. And I had actually, 7 or 8 years ago, spent a little bit of time researching Mormonism because I just find it really fascinating. So I was familiar with a lot to do with Mormonism. I'd read lots of bulletin boards, and I'd read ex-Mormon stories and things, but I tried reading the Book of Mormon, and I got about 4 paragraphs. I was like, nope, I cannot deal with this shit. No. So when I heard about David Michael, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I can like actually quote read the Book of Mormon. And I started listening to him, and he went on, I think it was when he went on AOA, Atheist on Air. And so I kind of followed him, and then I started learning about all these others. And when I started to follow him, I went on Twitter. I finally was like, yeah, I'm going to get a Twitter account. And that's when I ran into Paul, was on Twitter. And because I'd heard Quranify Me, the name bandied about here and there. So I got on Twitter, and that's where I started going, hey, I can like engage religious nut jobs on here, and I can like swear and stuff, and this is cool. And so yeah, I spent a lot of summer debating nut jobs on Twitter. And then my Facebook sort of took off after a while, and there's been a bit of a shift. So I spend more time on Facebook than Twitter now, but I'm trying to even it out somewhat if I can.
Yeah, I think I had the same thought as you did when I first started Twitter. Like, what's the big deal? It's 140 characters, yawn. But I got
Yep.
way more engaged with it than Facebook. And now I'm kind of coming back to Facebook because it seems like more atheists are on Facebook than on Twitter, at least in terms of Americans. That's just the way it goes. Think we like to be
Yeah,
verbose? Is that it? I don't know.
I do. And actually, back in 2006, I think it was, that was my first foray into engaging people online. I had seen something on TV that really pissed me off, and I was like, I want to go yell at Christians. So I found a Yahoo group that was run by these fundy nut jobs. And I joined this Yahoo group, and I actually was active in there for about a year and a half or so. And I mean, these guys are crazy. Like, one guy is like, if you support gay rights, you should be executed. And he's like from Tennessee, kind of thing. So it is crazy. But that's email or message boards. So you could type and write, basically essays on there all the time. But what I found about Twitter, it was actually a good experience because it forces you to hone your argument down to the nitty gritty. Now, I do sometimes do multi-tweet points, but I try to keep that to like under 5, if at all possible. And I just found that it helped me hone my arguments down just to the bare minimum, which is beneficial.
Yeah, it definitely helps you with the editing, the editing process. It gets to the
Hmm.
point. The only thing it gets me is occasionally you get these long threads going with like 7 people copied on it, and you get to say about 2 words, and then you're like,
Yeah.
how did I get copied on this thing? And it just never is going to end. And you can tell kind of
Hmm.
how some debates end up where it's just 2 people yelling at each other. And there's no actual understanding or caring. You're just
Yeah.
broadcasting to the world.
Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves about Twitter is that the other people you're tweeting to counts against your characters. I'm like, that's stupid. That shouldn't count. You should always have 140 characters of text to write, but I didn't make Twitter, so whoever made Twitter, fix that shit.
So how did you go from like a listener of shows to being part of them, and then actually like performing, especially on Quranify, get going?
That's a fun story too. So as I especially with Atheists on Air, when I started watching them and I realized that they had live chat, I was like, this is really cool. This is what I like about YouTube TV is that a live show, like nobody does live TV hardly anymore. And this stuff is live, and I can actually interact with other people who are fans of the show, and sometimes even the people that whose show it is. So I started hanging out in the AOA chat room, and that's where I met Beth, my co-host. I had never seen her, heard of her before. That's where I met Ken and Auntie Atheist from Forbidden Fruit, which is one of the shows that I do some co-hosting on. That's where I met Shuj and Tribble, who's got the other show that I co-host on. I met Dave Foda in there, who's a good friend. Like, just all these people that came out of one place, and I got just this feeling that I really needed to be a part of this movement and that I needed to get off my ass and do something, because a problem that we have in Canada, and everybody come watch my show tomorrow because we're going to talk all about Canada, is we are lazy asses up here because religion is not in our faces day in and day out like it is in the US, and especially like it is in the Bible Belt. It's just considered rude, and in a lot of venues it's actually not even allowed. Like, for instance, when I went back to college last year, I was studying human resources, and if somebody is applying for a job in Canada, you are legally not allowed to ask their or even mention religion in that interview process. It is absolutely forbidden. So we get kind of, and I've told people up here before that we live in a bubble. I was a happy atheist for 17 years before I ever decided to go interact in the Yahoo group, because it wasn't necessary. It wasn't part of my life. I didn't see religion in my day-to-day life. It wasn't bothering me, and I was doing the old, well, live and let live, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and I didn't care. But when I started paying attention to what other people have to go through, when I started hearing all the stories, and I mean, I knew that people were being disowned by their family when they decided to be atheist, or when they realized that they were atheist, because you don't really decide that. But I knew people were, and losing their jobs, losing their families, possibly marriages and things like that, being ostracized. I knew it happened, but it wasn't in my sphere of reference because it's not as big a thing here. And when I started seeing that on other people's shows and hearing those stories, I was just like, I can't just sit on my ass and gripe at the television and be done with it. I can't do that. So I started sort of being every show that had like a live chat that I liked, that I was into, I would try to be there for their live show and be in their chat. And that's where I met more and more people that I learned from, that I found out, oh, you have a show? I can go watch your show now too, or listen, whatever that might be. And eventually I just sort of was kind of everywhere. And then there was one night on Forbidden Fruit, I was in the chat room, and I got told in no uncertain terms to call into the show. So I was like, okay. And I did, and then it was like I was co-hosting shortly thereafter. And, I ended up, Shujin was like, oh, you come on my show, and so then I was doing that. But my show was sort of by accident, because anybody who follows Atheists on Air knows that life kind of blew up for Cash. The end of this had to seriously scale back what he was able to do. And there was a bit of a void there, because a lot of people, that was their weekly dose of rationality, and they felt that catharsis from Cash's rants, and they got that good laugh from Pastor Roy, and learned some cool shit from Professor Stephen. And there was like, well, what am I going to do on my Monday now? Like, what am I going to do? And Beth and we had very loosely talked about maybe doing something together, because she's done other kinds of podcasts and such before, and she was thinking about doing something with her blog and that kind of thing. And we got talking, and we were talking with our friend Dave Foda, and we were like, well, we could just like do a hangout. So the first week that Cash was away when he moved, we just had like a regular old hangout. And I said, well, at least we can get together and talk about rational and skeptical stuff, and be that weekly dose of rationality for people informally. And we were doing the hangout, and I think Shujin dropped by, and he said, he said something about Cash, and I said, well, how's Cash going to see this? And he says, well, aren't you broadcasting? Aren't you recording? I'm like, you have to do something to record this stuff? Because I think it was like only my third or fourth hangout ever at that point. So that's when I found out that, no, you actually have to broadcast if you want to, preserve this stuff for posterity. And then when Cash came back and said, look, I'm going to have to scale back to once a month. I can't do it right now. The three of us, and Beth and I in particular, said, well, that leaves 3 weeks out of the month. We could do just a little informal something to tide people over until, Cash comes back. So that's what we did. That first week we went on, and did our thing, and Dave was with us, and we had fun, and people kind of liked it, and it just sort of took off from there. And then Cash moved to Sunday, which opened up, all the weeks, and we just sort of kept going.
And now you're on, is it 12 or 13 this week?
This is episode Lucky 13.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And when do you get the bug to do a show? When does you decide, you know what, I need to do another one. This isn't enough for me.
Well, by the time I got my own show, that was show number 3. Now, with the other guys, it's really awesome because I could just show up and talk. I don't have to do any prep work. I don't have to worry about what the topic's going to be. I have none of that responsibility. I just show up and open my app and say stuff. But what then happened is a friend of mine, Kai, approached me, and he had an idea about a show that wasn't about atheism, but was about people helping people. And that's where the new show, My Secular Savior, comes from. So it's just a pre-recorded podcast right now. We do want to go to live video eventually, but it's the format is we're talking about life struggles from a purely secular point of view and framing it in the context of music. Because a lot of people will, especially you think of the breakup song, right? So when you've had a breakup and there's like that go-to song or a band that you really like to play when you're feeling crappy, or if you're in a good mood and there might be a great song that you like to just dance around the house to. So we wanted to bring that into the show and frame our episodes around music in that way. So, and the thing that was important to us, because a lot of people, when they go through tough times, and they might reach out to family and friends, but if you're in an area where you're the only atheist around, you're going to get a lot of, well, you need to go to church more, and you need to pray to Jesus more, donate more to the church, and that kind of crap. So this is, even though we're not going to be talking about the God issue, we're not going to be talking about why religion is silly or that specifically, it's a safe, secular place for people to come listen to what we've experienced. We talk about how we cope with things. We give out resources to go to if you're needing assistance by somebody, because we're just people, right? We don't have any, we're not professionals, although Kai and I both have some professional training, but we're not a psychologist or a psychiatrist by any stretch. So we'll find those resources and provide them as well. And it's something that we're really passionate about. And we've only got 4 episodes, and we've already are having people ask if they can come and tell their story too. So we're really excited about that.
Sounds pretty good. So is it hard? I mean, obviously, getting to know people in the atheist movement, it's hard to even catch up with all the names of the podcast. Is it even harder to catch up and listen to everything since you're doing, 300 shows now?
It is, and I get, I found out about 2 new ones this week already, and I'm like, I want to support you guys so much, and I'm like, okay, where am I going to listen to that? But I do try a lot. I have my staples that I've liked from the beginning, and I go back to those. But yeah, there are a lot of newbies coming out there, and I think it's wonderful. And Cash has said this before, and I agree. It doesn't matter, even if you're saying the exact same stuff that someone else in another show is saying, you're going to get people that guy isn't going to get, and that guy's going to get people that you're not going to get. Excuse me. And the more voices that we have out there, the more normal we're going to be. It's like, oh, there's an atheist podcast. Not like, those heathens are on the air. It's just going to be a regular thing, and I think we need to do that. And the more people that come out there and say, hey, I want to stand up and talk too, and I want people to see that I'm out here and I'm just a regular person, but I feel the same way about this, that, and the other thing that all these other secularist folk do, or I disagree with some of these other secular folk, which is great, because there's that notion that, you know, atheism is a religion, so if you're an atheist, you're all the same because we think Christians are all the same or Muslims are all the same, which is bullshit. And we need to get away from that idea. So if we have atheist voices out there who are all different and all doing different things, maybe people will finally get the clue that atheist does not mean one thing other than we don't believe in gods. That's all.
Yep, and then we can have headgear like this. So
that's right.
Like, should I have that on all the time when I do this? No, I shouldn't do that. Yeah, I'm with you, because the whole concept of doing interviews is not exactly groundbreaking, but I'm like, you know what, there's some people I just want to talk to, and I want to do a show, and so that's what I'm going to do, because this is kind of the easiest format to do quickly. Until I get sucked into the whole podcast era, then it's going to be trouble. Then I'm going to be like you and be doing segments, and you want to do this show, you want to do this show, and then then that's the end of me, but in a good way. At least that's what I think.
I mean, it's more work than I originally bargained for, but it's fine. It's good. It's what I need to do. You know, it's sustaining in a way that I hadn't thought it would be. So there's always that.
Okay, so I have a question. So what do you think it would take to get more female activists on the atheism side? Because it seems like the Abrahamic religions are just really hard on women, but they seem to be some of the most devoted and entrenched followers.
I know, and that's something that's important to Beth and I, and our good friend Miss Ashley. We've talked with her about too. Is that we need to get. I think if more of us on the secular side are visible, and we do get our voices out there, we stand up and say, "Hey, I am a secular woman, and I matter." And if you don't, you know, it makes it safer for women who might be considering leaving faith, because there's that perception that, with my own mother, who isn't, I mean, I can't shake her out of the God crap, but she's not, you know, uber religious, but she had that idea that to be a good mother, she had to make us go to bloody Sunday school and church every week. And that was purely because that's what she was taught, and that's what her mother was taught, and it's bullshit. And if more of us stand up and say, no, there's better ways of doing this, and better ways of being out there, and you know, you don't have to be religious to be maternal. You don't have to be religious to succeed out there as a woman. It doesn't have to be that way. And you don't have to be a bitch to be a secular woman either, although we sort of are, but you don't have to. There's all kinds of women out there who have voices that I hope that the more of us will inspire more women who are curious or doubting or whatnot to take the step and be secular and be proud of it.
And I think as important it is to have as many voices out there, to have the female voices, and to have like female co-hosts of the show like yours is a great thing indeed. And speaking of a female co-host, Miss Ashley mentioned on Twitter, just don't mention the song. I don't think that's an inside joke that you know about.
Well, a couple weeks ago, I was the guest on No Religion Required, and they tortured me with some country song about Jesus, and that's all I want to say. 'Cause it's
right, awful. Yeah, so, yeah, it's a good time to kind of transition, because After kind of catching up with their show and hearing, I mean, the first time I heard No Religion Required was when they were at ReasonCon last year, and I was like,
Mhm.
I need to get to one of these conferences. So I made sure at the beginning of this year to sign up for ReasonCon. So you've not only signed up for the show, you're actually taking like the deluxe package. You're like doing a car
I
ride with them, and I believe part of it involves you and Miss Ashley getting married at some point. Is that
Well, we had a show on marriage equality a couple of weeks ago, and Miss Ashley guested with us then too. And yeah, we were just talking about how it would be funny if we just went and got married just to stick it to the people who have issues with that. So I don't know. She said we're cracking the wine when we leave the house in Savannah. So we'll see. We'll see how far. Bobby and Paul both said that we're going to be unconscious before we leave Georgia, so Bobby C is going to have a nice quiet ride. Hello, kitty.
That sounds like that. Hey, this is a Chewy. We'll call him
Hi, Chewy.
Skeptical Cat. Yeah, he just likes
Aw,
to be part of the show, and he's probably louder than me when it comes down to his
mine
purring
are all
level.
mine
It's
are all.
unfortunate because I was like, oh, maybe I'm in Atlanta. That's on the way, but they're actually going a different way. So sadly, not going to be in that car ride. Although I expect there's going to be some great outtakes from that audio wise. Didn't you say there's a video
Well,
camera? Oh boy.
yes, I am bringing a video camera. So if you've watched my show or my time with Miss Ashley, you might have heard that both Miss Ashley and I used to be ghost hunters. So we have some equipment, and we're gonna do something fun to do with that when we're at ReasonCon. From a secular viewpoint, of course. But yeah, the video camera was from my ghost hunting days, and it's kind of been collecting dust since then. So I'm gonna break it out and video some heathens and stuff. And of course, I've been told there's all kinds of drunk casting going to be happening. So I'll be bringing my audio recorder and not hoping to catch EVP ghost noises on it.
Yeah.
Like some actual live drunk people. That's much better.
Yeah, I think that's Bobby's advantage for not drinking is he got to be the one to kind of record all that stuff while everybody else was just having a good time. So it's
Yep,
gonna be a great one. So I saw
absolutely.
on your Facebook timeline you mentioned that Canada just struck down a law, and this might not be just, but they struck down a law that banned doctors from assisted suicide. Do you think this is something that'll
Yes.
ever pass in the United States?
I don't know about you guys. I really hope so. I was really fortunate too. In November, we had the very first conference in this part of the country in Ontario, up in Toronto, called the Non-Conference for Non-Believers. And one of the speakers we had there, he was from Death with Dignity, and was speaking about that whole issue and just the impact that it has on families and people. And I just don't understand that mentality, because you as a pet owner and myself, I've had cats my whole life. We treat our animals better than that. Like, we always say, well, if the animal's suffering, we need to do something about that. Why the hell can't we do that for ourselves? Right? Like, if I say, look, I'm suffering to a point that I don't want to anymore, why the hell can't I get assistance with that? It's just, I don't understand that at all. And the U.S. seems to be really, you guys love the slippery slope. Love it. It's like, well, if we get Obamacare, they're going to have death panels that are just going to decide that you don't get medical care and you just have to go off and die. And if we have assisted suicide, well, doctors are just going to start, walking down the street and going, oh, I don't like that guy, send him in for euthanasia. Like, come on, people.
Yeah,
This is, yeah.
it's a bit of an irony that if there isn't some kind of comprehensive health care reform, then that's probably what's going to end up happening eventually. Just
Yeah, like the other mentality that I don't get from down there, and when you see it with the Obamacare and the just absolute distaste for any kind of a social network, is this whole mentality of like, I'm going to like implode before I give something to anyone for nothing. I don't understand that mentality. Like that whole like, I'm not paying for so and so's health care, and it's like, it's not exactly like that. We pay into health care, and it's money that we've already invested. It comes out of our pay. And even if I was paying partly for someone else's health care, in the future, that person could be paying for my health care. So it's not a, oh, I'm just giving away all my money to people because, you know, I'm being told I have to. It's not at all. And the same with social networks, that whole mentality of, well, poor people just aren't working hard enough, and they're just lazy. And I have heard so many stories of the working poor in the United States, and some of those people have 2, 3, 4 jobs, and they can't ever get a job that will sustain them because corporate America's profit margin is more important than paying a living wage. And we're better, but not a whole lot better. And I blame being next to you guys.
It's all our fault. Yeah, you don't
Yep.
even think it's like, my wife and I, we don't have kids, but we're still paying into public schools, and we're perfectly okay with that. Or there are things the government does pay for we don't use, or there are things we use more than whatever our fair share is. And it's weird that we have this thing about, you know, one person who gets welfare as opposed to a company that basically never pays any taxes, and that's like billions of dollars. Or our
Yep.
churches that don't pay taxes and, you know, cover up
Yep.
kinds of crimes done on their end. So it's not even system. What are you going to do?
I've heard it said, excuse me, from Americans that, well, it should be the churches that take care of the poor, not the government. Well, if churches were taking care of the poor, then why do you still have poor? Because
Yeah,
there's,
well, you know, you got to pay for these mega churches, and you got to pay for these Bentleys and the gold crosses.
no,
The crosses have to be gold; they can't be fake gold because you'll leave a mark.
and Joel Osteen needs a bigger mansion, you know.
That is true. We have a pastor you may have heard of in Atlanta named Creflo Dollar,
Just
and
thinking of him.
he's been busted for all kinds of stuff, and people just hand him like suitcases of cash. It's just like, oh, you're just
And
openly like, I'm just taking money. I'm not doing
is that
anything.
his real name, Dolph?
Probably
Is
not.
that actually his real?
Don't know the exact. Yeah, the Christian name. Not sure what that is, but that's the way it
Okay.
goes.
I have absolutely heard of that guy because that name always stuck in my head. He's like one of those prosperity ministers whose name is Dollar. Like that's just, yeah. That if that doesn't send up a red flag, then you're just a major sheep.
Yeah, anytime a guy's like busted for that kind of stuff and people still follow them, it's like you don't even really care, do you? You're just like, I want to follow somebody who talks nice and dresses nice, and maybe I'll be him someday. I mean, I don't know. It's an
Yeah.
unfortunate situation. I mean, it's just the way it is. Even in Atlanta, a somewhat liberal town, I go to kind of a local atheist group, and on the like 12-mile drive home, I see like 500 churches. It's beyond.
Yeah, I've been to Georgia a few times. You may not know this, but I used to be married to a guy from Richmond, Virginia. And my in-laws, they'd lived in Richmond for a long time, but they were from Georgia. So I've been up there a couple of times, or down there, been down there a couple of times, and been to Atlanta. I've flown out of Atlanta, and I've driven by your KFC with the giant chicken. So that was kind of cool.
Oh yeah, the big chicken. Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to Ken about that. Ken, the host of Forbidden Fruit, he's in Atlanta.
Oh, we'll have
So
to get him on a show or something, or hang out, because
he's gonna be at ReasonCon as well.
that's freaking awesome. Yeah, I was looking at a picture I took from a church, and it says, "Is your Lord large enough?" That's a good question. It's something you must always ask yourself.
Wow. Supersized God, huh?
Always got to be, yeah. So you've mentioned a few shows during our time together. So, what are the shows you listen to and the people you enjoy? When you have a spare moment.
Oh goodness. Well, of course, and people were after me on Sunday night because I actually missed AOA, but that's because I was in Toronto at a heathen meeting, so that was special circumstances. But I always catch AOA otherwise. David Michael, Book of Mormon, and Paul Quranify Me, of course. And of course, I love The Scathing Atheist and Cognitive Dissonance. And there's Bryce with Naked Mormonism. There's the Unbuckling the Bible Belt guys. There's Off the Reservation guys. I'm going to forget someone because there's too many bloody shows.
Think country music. Think country music.
Well, yes, of course. There's Bobby and Ashley and Bill and Susie, of course, the Barroom Atheist. There's more. I listened to Imaginary Friends and Herd Mentality, or Aussie Friends, and Miss Donna Down Under, of course, who was on our show a couple of weeks ago. So there's the Aussie contingent. There's more, and I know I'm forgetting somebody somewhere.
I'm not going to say you're in trouble for anybody you missed, but you're in trouble for anybody you missed. That's just how it is.
Yeah, well, of course, and there's you, but you're easy to keep up with because you've only got 5 episodes. So
I'm brand spanking new. So before we call it a night,
and Dustin and Wesley, the Atheist Nomads, I listen to them too.
Darn right.
Yeah.
Was there anything that I missed tonight that you wanted to talk about, or you think we talked out?
I think we got just about everything, and letting people know about My Secular Savior is important, and that's at mysecularsavior.com. We're recording episode 5 this week, and we actually have a listener who is going to have us interview them for the show, and and we're just letting this do what it does. Like, we started with our style, and we've really said, you guys who are listening, you tell us what you need and what you want, and we'll do what we can to make it happen. So we've already had, last episode we had somebody submit their diary story. We have another one for this episode. There was someone else approached us today for one. We have a guest this week as well, and that's what we want. We want everybody who feels like this is something that they can benefit from to get involved, and we want to be there for each other because everybody has had ups and downs in life. Everybody has had things that worked for them that didn't work for them, and our biggest thing is we don't want anybody out there to think that they're suffering something by themselves. And it happens so often, and we want to do what we can to prevent that. So anybody out there who wants to tell their story, and it doesn't even have to be, like, we're going to talk about things like setting limits with where you think you need help with stuff. We're going to talk about relationship issues. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about pornography. We're going to talk about all kinds of good stuff as well with the negative stuff. So we want it just to be a community. So, and it's starting. I mean, after 4 episodes, and we've already got people sending us stuff, so we're excited about that. So mysecularsavior.com. And another exciting project too is that Beyond the Trailer Park is now part of Secular TV. And they are a fledgling YouTube channel. They're about 2 months old, and they're really gonna do some good things. I think they have a really good concept that works towards helping people grow in their creating whatever it is they're going to create. There's live shows. They're going to have podcasts hosted. There's just shows about all kinds of stuff. There's stuff about religion. There's stuff about um, comic books and gaming, and there's stuff about philosophy. There's stuff about science. It's just all kinds of stuff. So that's where our live broadcast now on Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern is through the Secular TV channel. So you can always catch us there. So I think that's about it.
That's a lot of it. So before we call it a night, is there anything that you wanted to ask me?
So where do you want to go in the secular movement? What's your goal?
Well, I'm really enjoying doing the show, but I kind of like, I'm looking to have like some kind of cause, I think, that I want to get behind. I don't really know specifically what that is yet, but I just, being able to interact with all these people is really just, that part is fun, but it's like, well, what are we doing to make the world a better place? So we'll see, especially in, we're on the buckle of the Bible Belt, that's probably Mississippi or something, but we're there. And it's a big, it's one of them big and tall store belts. That's what it is.
Yep.
And it covers pretty much an entire country.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those Texas size buckles, right?
That's what we need. Yeah, one of them big ones. Okay, so you've mentioned your show. So where do people find you on the Facebooks and the Twitters?
Well, if you look up Heretic Woman on Facebook, I do have it as my nickname, so I will come up. Twitter is at Heretic Woman. There's also for Beyond the Trailer Park, we're at Beyond TT Park because Twitter's small like that, couldn't fit it all in. We also at My Secular Savior. You can find Twitter on there as well. G Plus Heretic Woman YouTube channel, Heretic Woman. So that's the main one, I think.
Perfect.
I've been using that since 2006, so I don't think there's any other ones.
That's the original Heretic Woman. Do not accept any substitutes. Well, thank you very much, Deb, for being on the show.
Me?
Anybody wants to find me, it's pretty simple. Zachrilege on Twitter, and then you can find the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Try to update that as much as possible, just to kind of highlight. At this point, I'm more highlighting the guests than myself because, hey, I just like to listen to them talk, and I think you do too. So once again, thanks, Deb, for being on the show, and thanks for everybody who's been on the show, everybody who watches the show, everybody who's just thinking about, gosh, there's some show interviewing atheist podcast people out there, and this is the one. So once again, thank you, everybody. Good night, good luck, and stay skeptical.